All right, class. This is a review of some of the release exams. This is the two. I'm just going to go through some of the practice. Just going to go through some of the questions that we have here, and give you some of the answers. So the first one you see is George Washington's farewell address from 1796. And in the question it says, in his farewell address, how did George Washington attempt to influence the policy of the United States? A, he advised the nation to favor those countries with commercial ties to the United States. B, he encouraged politicians to promote a foreign policy of imperialism. C, he recommended a policy of neutrality with other nations. Or D, he advocated for an alliance with European nations. And so, you're looking here, so I would first, before we even read this, what do we remember about George Washington's farewell address? Well, remember, number one, he warns us to stay away from permanent foreign alliances. Number two, so permanent foreign alliances leads us to believe in neutrality. Number two, no political parties. Number three, staying away from sectionalism, North and South. And so I would look at the first sentence. The great rule of conduct for us in regard to foreign nations is in extending our commercial relations to have with them as little political connection as possible. So far as we have already formed engagements, let them be fulfilled with perfect good faith. Here, let us stop. Europe has a set of primary interests which to us have none or a very remote relation. Hence, she must be engaged in frequent controversies, the causes of which are essentially foreign to our concerns. Hence, therefore, it must be unwise. This is the key part here. All right. It would be unwise in us to implicate ourselves by artificial ties or alliances, the ordinary vicissitudes of her politics, or the ordinary combinations and collisions of her friendships and enmities. So in that first paragraph there, and I think that, as little political connection as possible, right? He talks about Europe has the interests to which we have none, right? It would be unwise to implicate ourselves by artificial ties, right? So in those three instances, he's talking about neutrality. He's warning us to stay away from political foreign alliances, or those artificial ties. Those would be those foreign alliances. So the correct answer would be C, neutrality. Imperialism is something that you talk about in American 2. We haven't talked about imperialism. And A and D, they're kind of similar in the fact that there's some sort of alliance there, which runs counter to C. So C is the correct answer. Going on, the American Party platform. This is the same thing as a Know Nothing Party. So, all right, so Know Nothing Party, American Party. What do I know about this? Is anti-immigrant, all right? So the question, how did the American Party respond to the immigration of Germans in the Midwest and Irish in the East? So if we know that the American Party or the Know Nothing Party are anti-immigrant, then we should look for some of the answers that are in the same vein and in the same spirit as this anti-immigration platform. So is it A, it built low-cost government housing projects to accommodate the influx of European immigrants? That seems like it would be something that's more accommodating to immigrants and not necessarily gelling with the purpose of this party. B, it called for the exclusion of people born outside the United States from voting or holding political office. That looks like it's something that could be a plank in a platform that the Know Nothing Party or the American Party could get behind. C, created education and job programs to help immigrants. Well, that seems to be too helpful for them. Or D, it proposed an amendment to make English the national language and ban the speaking of foreign language. So that could be something. So B and D, calling for the exclusion of people born outside the United States from holding political office or voting. Or D, it proposed an amendment to make English the national language. So let's look to see what we can find in the passage. Americans must rule America, and to this end, native-born citizens should be elected for all state, federal, and municipal offices of government in preference to all others. Wow, that first sentence there I think speaks really to B. It called for the exclusion of people born outside the United States from voting or holding political office. Let's see if there's anything else. I mean, you could keep on reading and you find, I think, this third paragraph right there. You might find some answers there that would help you out. But I think in that first line would call for the correct answer to be B. All right. So number 3, in a response letter to John Holmes in April of 1820 concerning the Missouri question, Thomas Jefferson wrote, all right. So Missouri 1820, Missouri Compromise, and in the question, why did Jefferson believe that the passage of the Missouri Compromise would deepen sectional conflict? So a couple of things here. All right, Missouri Compromise, what was it? Missouri comes in as a slave state. Maine comes in as a free state with 3630 line. Above that line is free. Below that line is slave. All right, we're good. Sectional conflict, sectionalism. Okay, North versus South. All right, so answer choice A, each enactment by Congress that took power away from the states would have built more resentment. Well, that seems more like a states' rights issue, not really dealing with the institution of slavery or anything, so we could probably eliminate A without even reading this. B, while some wanted slavery to end immediately, others wanted to end gradually. Okay, maybe B. C, Americans would have argued forever over the line once it was created. All right, he's talking about the 3630 line. D, added new states would have recreated the competition. All right, so I think B, C, and D could all be in the running for maybe the possible correct answer. So let's look at the passage here and see if we can't root out the correct answer. Thomas Jefferson writes, this momentous question, like a fire bell in the night, awakened and filled me with terror. I considered it at once the death knell of the Union. But this is a reprieve only, not a final sentence. A geographical line. Oh, okay. All right. So right away, the geographical line, it kind of leads me to answer choice C. But let's see what he says about this geographical line. A geographical line coinciding with a marked principle, moral and political, once conceived and held up to the angry passions of men, would never be obliterated, and every new irritation will mark it deeper and deeper. That the cession of that kind of property would not cost me in a second thought if a general emancipation could be effected. But as it is, we have the wolf by the ear, and we can neither hold him nor safely let him go. Justice in one scale and self-preservation in the other. I think that third sentence there, a geographical line coinciding with a marked principle, moral, and political, once conceived and held up to the angry passions of men, would never be obliterated. So I would say the answer choice is C. Americans would have argued forever the line once it's created, and they do. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 is a great example of that, arguing over is it going to be slave or is it going to be free. All right, number 4, Angelina Grimke, the Grimke sisters. So we know that she's part of the abolitionist movement during the Reform era, an appeal to the Christian women of the South, 1836. And the question goes, how did Angelina Grimke's religious beliefs affect her participation in the abolitionist movement? All right, is it A, Miss Grimke focused on urging slave owners in the South to free their slaves in order to avoid punishment from God? B, Miss Grimke worked to convince women as Christians and mothers that slavery was immoral and should be abolished? C, Miss Grimke led political protests and petitioned the federal government to end slavery immediately? Or D, Miss Grimke used the Bible to defend her roles as both slave owner and advocate for the spread of slavery? So right off the bat, I can eliminate 2 answer choices. I can eliminate C, because that doesn't really, I think that wouldn't really speak to anything dealing with religious beliefs. And then D, right? If you're a part of the abolitionist movement, you're not going to defend your role as a slave owner, right? You're against slavery. So C and D right off the bat, eliminate. So now down to a 50-50 shot. So let's see what the quote says. I appeal to you, my friends, as mothers. Oh, wait. So the only answer choice that has mothers in it is B. Okay, so let's see if I'll read it. I appeal to you, my friends, as mothers. Are you willing to enslave your children? You start back with horror and indignation at such a question. But why, if slavery is no wrong to those upon whom it is imposed? I would say that Miss Grimke worked against women as Christians and mothers, right? That slavery was immoral and should be abolished. Basically, she's saying, I would ask any mom here, would you enslave your child? And when you ask that question, she says the response from these moms is horror. No, I would never do that. Well, if you would never enslave your child, why is it okay for slavery to enslave other children and the children of other mothers? So B, Christian, Miss Grimke worked to convince women as Christians and mothers that slavery was immoral and should be abolished. Once again, it cannot be A because it doesn't talk anything about a punishment from God. All right. This is a speech by Frederick Douglass, that 4th of July speech that I've talked to you about. All right, so if I know it's by Frederick Douglass, I know it's from 1852. All right, he's an abolitionist. Okay, he's against slavery. So what understanding did Frederick Douglass wish to convey in his speech? What's the purpose here to his speech? What to a slave is the 4th of July? A, the extent to which slavery and citizenship share common characteristics. B, the degree to which slaves were denied the civil rights they were granted in the U.S. Constitution. C, the connection between the right to vote and the realization of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Or D, the contrast between the ideas expressed in the Declaration of Independence and the realities of slavery. All right, so I think a couple things here. A, I can eliminate the extent to which slavery and citizenship share common characteristics. If Frederick Douglass is a abolitionist, I don't think he would ever say anything along those lines. I think you could also eliminate B, because the 4th of July, Declaration of Independence. All right, so they try to throw you a curveball there with this civil rights and U.S. Constitution. I would toss that because the 4th of July is talking about the Declaration of Independence. Okay, all right, so C or D? Well, the connection between the right to vote and the realization of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, I think you can eliminate that automatically because, slaves can't vote. I think his number one goal here would be to get slaves their freedom first before they can be able to vote. So you can eliminate C, and then that leaves you, without even reading the passage, it leaves you with the correct answer, D. The contrast between the ideas expressed in the Declaration of Independence, July 4th, and the realities of slavery, right? All right, going on to number 6. Once again, this is a speech from the 1850s. I think if you remember our 1850s leading up to the Civil War, sectionalism, slavery. All right, I'm in that mindset here. All right, so what's the question? According to Hammond, how did freedom and equality contribute to the justification of the economic system of slavery in the South? Hammond is from South Carolina. He's a strong advocate or supporter of slavery and included the justifications of the institution to many of his speeches. So why is slavery, how can it be moral? How can it be right? Let's see what the answer choices are. Hammond stated that poor people of all races should be slaves because slave owners provide their slaves with basic life necessities. B, Hammond argued that American slaves were inferior as a race, but they were treated much better than other impoverished people. C, Hammond thought that slaves should receive monetary wages for their work, but at a much lower rate than whites who performed the same jobs. Or D, Hammond believed that states' rights were an essential part of freedom and therefore supported slavery only to advance this position. So in this case, you're going to have to read a little bit because all these would be some sort of justification that could possibly be put into the speech. So what does he say? So in this excerpt, it says, the senator from New York said yesterday that the whole world had abolished slavery. All the powers of the earth cannot abolish that. In short, your whole hireling class of manual laborers are essentially slaves. The difference between us is that our slaves are hired for life and well compensated. There is no starvation, no begging, no want of employment among our people, and not too much employment either. Yours are hired by the day, not cared for, and scantily compensated, which may be proved to in the most painful manner at any hour in any street of your large towns. Why, you meet more beggars in one day in any single street of the city of New York than you would meet in a lifetime in the whole South. We do not think that whites should be slaves either by law or necessity. Our slaves are black or another race. The status in which we have placed them is an elevation. They are happy, content, unaspiring. Yours are white, of your own race. You are brothers of one blood. They are your equals in natural endowment of intellect, and they feel galled by their degradation. So basically, I think this first part here could really help you out. He's saying, like, in your short, he's talking to the Northerners, right, in New York. In short, everybody that's working in your factories are essentially slaves, right? And then he said the difference between our slaves is that they're hired for life and well compensated. There is no starvation, so on and so forth. And yours are living in squalor. So Hammond stated that poor people of all races should be slaves because slave owners provide their slaves with basic life necessities. Hammond argued that American slaves were inferior as a race, but they're treated much better than other impoverished people. I would say that B would be the correct answer here. And looking at that first part right up there, where he's talking about they're well compensated, they're fed, so on and so forth. All right, number 7, this is just a straight up, recall question. How did the outcome of the Mexican-American War, which added new lands to America, increase sectional tensions throughout the 1850s? Mexican-American War. Okay, what do we know about the Mexican-American War and getting new land? We know that the Compromise of 1850 happened. California's a free state. Mexican territory that we get from Mexico is determined by popular sovereignty and a strict Fugitive Slave Act. So let's see what we can get here. A, Southern farmers resented their wealth gained from California gold. B, Texas and California did not desire statehood, which angered New England politicians. C, territorial expansion led to the intense debates about the extension of slavery into new areas. And then D, agriculture became the dominant economic activity in the new areas, which threatened manufacturing interests. So going back, Compromise of 1850, this is the 1850s in general, right? It's all about the debate over the expansion of slavery. Just dealing with that, I think you can go ahead and strictly pick C. Territorial expansion led to intense debates about the extension of slavery into the new areas. That's why that's why popular sovereignty comes up. That's why you have the Kansas-Nebraska Act come up in the 1850s that increased those sectional tensions. All right, so this next part, answer choice is C. The next part is from 1798, the Alien Sedition Acts. Okay, so we know John Adams, Alien Sedition Acts. All right, so let's see what I got. All right, how did the quasi-war with France and the passage of the Alien Sedition Acts affect American politics? A, legislation was passed that limited U.S. citizens' First Amendment rights. B, legislation was passed that increased the power of the state's governments. C, legislation was passed that limited the power of the president during wartime. Or D, legislation was passed that expanded voting rights to newly immigrated citizens. So Alien Sedition Acts, it increases the time of a naturalized citizen to be able to vote from 5 years to 14 years. And the sedition part said that that the federal government can jail or fine anybody writing anything critical of the federal government. So let's see what it says. It shall be lawful for the President of the United States to order all such aliens as he judged dangerous to the peace and the safety of the United States to depart out of the territory of the United States. Oh, wow, he can deport anybody he wants, which he claims or seems to be dangerous. So the President has his power. If any person shall write, print, or utter, or publish scandalous or malicious writings against the government of the United States, they shall be punished by a fine and imprisonment. All right, so let's see here. I would say that the answer choices would be either A, the legislation was passed that limited U.S. citizens' First Amendment rights, or C, legislation was passed that limited the power of the president during the wartime, because it talks about the president there and it talks about First Amendment rights with the freedom of the press. All right, but here's the thing. It should be lawful for the President of the United States to order. So it seems like he's increasing the power, or the Alien Sedition Acts are increasing the power of the President. So it can't be C. So if anybody that writes or prints or publishes or utters anything that's scandalous or malicious against the government, they should be punished by a fine and thrown into jail. I think that would definitely limit your First Amendment right of freedom of speech, press, and so on. All right, let's see. How did this proclamation contribute to the colonial unrest leading up to the Revolutionary War? So the proclamation. What proclamation do we talk about leading up to the Revolutionary War? The Proclamation of 1763. What was the Proclamation of 1763? King George essentially says, all right, anything west of the Appalachian Mountains, colonists cannot settle there. So let's see what the questions say. Colonists wanted to settle in the Ohio Valley and lands farther west. How did this proclamation, the Proclamation of 1763, contribute to the colonial unrest leading up to the Revolutionary War? If we know that the Proclamation of 1763 banned settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains and in the Ohio Valley, letter choice A, all right, has to be the right one. I'm not even going to read it. I know for a fact that letter choice A is correct. All right, so this seems like there's excerpts from some newspapers, 1866, 1870, 1870. So I'm thinking the area of Reconstruction, just by that time period. Let's see. It says, based on the above excerpts, what impact did the breakup of the plantation system have on African American families in the United States? Yes, so Reconstruction for sure. All right, so let's see what it says. It says, the first one, information wanted of Rosamond Mobley, who formerly belonged to Mr. C.P. Pellman. When heard of, she was going to Sumter to look for her father and mother. Any information will be thankfully received by Susanna Babridge. Information wanted is the second one. Marcella Shorter, colored, formerly of Washington County, Maryland, was last heard from in New Orleans. She's aged between 40 and 45, bright mulatto, kept furnished rooms some 12 years ago in New Orleans. She will hear of her brother by addressing Lloyd Shorter. And then last one, information wanted of my mother and father, who were, when I last heard from them, in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. They were formerly slaves. Okay. All right, so let's look. African-American families quickly assimilated into the dominant white culture. That means they blended in. Well, that doesn't really talk about these people looking for family members. B, African-American families in the South were given 40 acres and a mule. Well, that doesn't really talk about them looking for family members. C, African-American families broke apart so they could meet new people, which slavery had prevented. Well, that doesn't really look like that. They're not breaking apart. They're trying to regain those family ties again. So it has to be D. African-American family members who were separated by slavery worked hard to locate one another and reunite. Every single one is some information wanted about a family member and where they are. So it has to be D. Dred Scott versus Sanford, question 11. Dred Scott versus Sanford in 57. Decade of crisis, events leading up to the Civil War. It says that the Missouri Compromise is unconstitutional. Dred Scott declared that Congress did not have the authority to prohibit slavery in the territories, and they said that slaves were not citizens and could not sue in federal courts. So how did the ruling of by the U.S. Supreme Court in Dred Scott versus Sanford increase sectional tension? The decision supported the Missouri Compromise? No. Well, it just said that it was unconstitutional, so it couldn't support that. The ruling emancipated slaves when taken to free territories? No. Emancipated means free. It says that they did not have the power to prohibit slavery in the territories, so it cannot be B. The ruling that declared that regardless of location, slaves were not citizens, which Northerners viewed as a violation of state laws and human rights. Well, it says that slaves were not citizens right here, and Northerners would definitely might think differently because they are against slavery. So let's leave that one in the back pocket here. Or D, the decision struck down the power of Congress to prohibit slavery in the territories, eliminating the economic advantages of Southern planters. Well, if you struck down the power of Congress to prohibit slavery in the territories, that means slavery could expand, and you would increase, right, the economic advantages of the Southern planters. So it would have to be C, especially with sectional tension. All right, this is an excerpt from Horace Mann. All right, so Horace Mann, Education Reform. According to this quote, why is education essential to American society? The quote says, education then, beyond all other devices of human origin, is a great equalizer of the conditions of man, the balanced will of the social machinery. The greatest of all the arts in political economy is to change a consumer into a producer. All right, and the next greatest is to increase the producing power, and this to be directly obtained by increasing his intelligence. So according to this quote, why is education essential? Education is necessary necessary for political leadership. Education supports equality between men and women. Education is necessary for economic progress. Education supports a democratic form of government. Well, it doesn't really talk anything about political leadership. They try to throw you that because it says in political economy. Supports the equality between excuse me. Let me back up here. B, education supports equality between men and women. It doesn't really talk about that. C, education necessary for economic progress. They try to throw you that. They try to throw you that. That curveball when they're looking at political economy, and they use things like consumer and producer, right? So eliminate answer choice C as well. B and C are gone. Education supports a democratic form of government. So I would say A or D, right? A or D would be the ones that you can narrow it down to. Is education necessary for political leadership, or does education support a democratic form of government? I think D could be correct, but that's not what he's talking about here. When you look at this, the greatest of all the arts in political economy is to change a consumer into a producer, a follower into a leader, right? And the next greatest is to increase the producing power, all right? The ability to lead. All right, and how do you increase the ability to lead? All right, you increase their intelligence. How do you increase somebody's intelligence? Education. All right, so education is necessary for political leadership. You get education, you provide public education, you take people that used to follow, and you turn them into leaders. You provide them with more education, and they become stronger leaders. All right, so the answer choice there is A. All right, we see on question 13, the Emancipation Proclamation, right? Okay, what do we know about the Emancipation Proclamation? Yes, okay, it banned slavery in the Confederate States. Awesome. So the question goes, how did the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation affect U.S. relations with Great Britain and France? This is right during the war. It says, A, France and Great Britain became more reluctant to formally help out the Confederacy. Why would Britain and France help out the Confederacy in the first place? Well, remember, because of the cotton trade. That would be it. All right, answer choice A. Answer choice A is the correct answer. Number 14, how did the War of 1812 affect American society? Reform movements demanding the return of the American Indian land sprang up all around the United States. B, Americans celebrated the British heritage and looked to British culture. C, Americans expressed national pride and a sense of victory. Or D, new social welfare programs were created to aid war veterans. Well, what do we know about after the War of 1812? We said that surge of nationalism occurred. All right, so I would say just by knowing that, effect of War of 1812, nationalism, answer choice C, Americans expressed national pride would be the correct answer. All right, I hope that this has helped you out, and good luck.